Leviticus can be a confusing and intimidating book, but one theme comes through clearly. You must be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 2. In other words, people are called into a relationship with God, are meant to connect with Him and become like Him. Now there are personal and corporate implications for calling Him the Lord your God. Now this is not a casual relationship. For the questions of what holy means is very important. Most modern Christians equate holiness with righteousness or even religiosity. We often define it in terms of what we don't do or what we stand against rather than what we are called to do and stand for. But thinking of holiness simply as purity or righteousness is a dreadful misperception. The word really means to be set apart, to have a sacred purpose, and to do so dedicated to that purpose that we separate ourselves from anything that distracts us from it. The holiness certainly includes righteousness, but that's only because we separate ourselves from rebellion against God and become like Him. And because He is righteous and pure, if He, for example, were a mean-spirited or vindictive God, holiness would involve separating ourselves from anything that wasn't mean-spirited or vindictive and taking on that character. But because God is relentlessly, passionately, and unfathomably good, holiness for us means becoming relentlessly, passionately, and unfathomably good. So, at its core, holiness means turning away from anything, thought, word, or deed that contradicts our relationship to God and embracing our relationship with Him in every area of life. Now, since the Ten Commandments have been given and the tabernacle built, the book of Leviticus is filled with elaborate and complex instructions that define holiness in the righteous lives, community lives, and personal lives of God's people. See, this book is primarily directed at priests and is the tribe of Levi to whom God gave the task of maintaining the worship of Israel, who need not to give visible expressions of Israel's relationship with God, but invisible. So the purpose of the tabernacle was to host God's presence, and nearly everything in Leviticus relates to that purpose. Now, from our perspective, we tend to see the first 16 chapters as relating to Israel's ritual practices and the last 10 as relating to people's ethical behavior. However, that distinction was not nearly as strong in the minds of the Israelites. For them, the sacredness of God's presence encompassed all of life. The whole person, individually, socially, ethically, morally, and in whatever other terms we can frame our existence. For an ancient culture, that all of life approach involved practices that seem archaic to us today. We get a strong impression of the blood flowing continuously from the altars on the account of sin, of the otherness of a God who can't be encountered casually, of symbols and signs that must be shadows of something extraordinary in heaven. Now, many details for measurements and types of offering and celebrations of feast must point dramatically to a redemption plan and an eternal kingdom. They are pictures of the coming Messiah and an ultimate sacrifice that takes away the sins of an eternal high priest who intercedes for his people, and of a heavenly existence where God is worshipped and experienced openly and visibly. Yes, many of the laws protect Israel from health issues and a pre-scientific culture could not understand, but the Leviticus is so much more than a hygiene manual. It is filled with imagery of spiritual realities, a prophetic acts of sacrifice, offering, personal and corporate consecration and celebrations point participants towards a future, towards a true atonement and redemption by a merciful God who loves to be with His people. In that sense, Leviticus is a book that is better absorbed than deciphered. And when we learn to view Leviticus as an invitation into a relationship rather than as an ancient and demanding spiritual guidebook of approaching God, it takes a much more meaning, isn't it? We still may not grasp all the nuances and the rituals and the ethics, but we get a strong picture of the costliness of sin and otherness of God. And when we accept the invitation of this relationship through the Messiah, who fulfills all the requirements of the law, those pictures need to remain with us. He has paid the cost of inviting us into the otherness. The shadows of the eternal realities have given way to a full experience. And this is the beauty of this book, that we look beyond the pictures and the signs, and we look into the future of the Messiah, to which day we live in and which day we now partake of the true meaning of this book.